All right, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take a mesh and to make a high poly version that has different materials assigned to it to create an ID mask for use inside a Substance Painter. So for that, you're going to need to have a base model that has UVs on it. And in this case, we're going to be doing a Gladius. So if I select that and go into Unwrap UVW, open the UV editor, you see that I have gone through and UV unwrapped my model. And in this case, we're going to make a texture that has a 2:1 aspect ratio, twice as tall as it is wide, right? And so in this case, I've taken everything and scaled it over to fill up this UV space. So let's right click, convert that at poly. So I have my Scene Explorer open. If you don't have it open, it's Tools Scene Explorer. So this has a name on it. I'm going to go ahead and change that real quick and simplify it down to BN, my initials, underscore Gladius LP, right? You can use your initials. Substance Painter does not require you to name everything BN after me, right? So BN underscore Gladius, the name of the, so you have a prefix, which is your initials, then you have the name, and then you have a suffix on the end. And in this case, this mesh right here is what's going to go into the game engine. And so that is a LP, that's your low poly. You want to make sure you go into element, select everything, and clear all the smoothing groups, right? You don't want to have any smoothing groups on it. And then just assign them one smoothing group. One smoothing group for the whole thing. So clear all, then hit one. So now they all have one smoothing group. And then we're going to take this and copy that name. I'm going to come up here to File, Export Selected. And in that Gladius folder, we're going to paste that name in and export it out as an FBX file. We're going to say save. If you are doing your projects in the correct order, you would have done the column prior to this, and so your export, your FBX settings should already be set correctly. So hit OK. All right, now we're going to right-click on our model, and we're going to say clone. And remember, you want to clone as a copy, and you're going to call this underscore HP for high poly and hit OK. I'm going to right-click and say hide unselected. Right, so now the only thing selected currently is my high poly, at which point I can go into element, grab everything and say auto smooth. And then I can also come in here and I can start to assign different smoothing groups to the different parts of it. Orbit around the other side. And let's just grab 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure I don't have anything on the other side. And so these, clear these, and this will be 5, 6, 7, and 8. So now if I turn that off and orbit around, you see that I have the different smoothing groups in the different parts of my sword. And that's really what I wanted to get here. That was the big thing I was going for. All right, now we could, like we did with the column, we could just export this out. But there's another step we want to do in this case. So I'm going to click on the word editable poly, and actually I'm going to go to display, and I want to open up my material editor. I'm going to hit M to open that up. And so let's go in here, and I'm going to make a new multi-sub-object material. I'm going to call this Gladius. And now I'm going to bring in another scanline stand. I want to make a standard. I want to click the little minus and then drag that over and plug that into 1. And let's just, our Gladius is selected, our multi-sub object selected. Let's right click and assign that material. So what are the different materials we need for the sword? All right, we're going to need a blade. And so we can come over here and let's go to modify. And in element, we can come in here and grab the blade and just assign that ID 1. Now we're going to need, let's say we need like a wood texture. So let's bring over another standard, hit the little minus to make it smaller and drag that, plug that into 2, right? And so that would be, if we just click on the handle and assign it 2, and let's click on the Gladius here and this little color swatch in the corner, click on that, and let's get that kind of like a brown. There we go. And the colors don't have to match what you expect them to be. You could really just do RGB, whatever, right? Doesn't matter. Let's get like a gold in here. Let's bring in a standard. Make that smaller. Drag this up. And if you have the material selected, you could click on diffuse and just change the color there as well. So we're going to make this like a gold, right? And so where do we want that? We kind of want that on the top. So I'm going to region select and then orbit around. All right, and so this is going to now be ID 3. And then if we have room on the bottom, we could do that. Let's do this. I'm going to click edge. And I'm just going to click on this one edge here and hit ring, then hold control. And then I want to grow that a little bit more because that should get all, there we go. Let's call that base part. And then let's look at the front, hold alt and region selected D. There we go. And so this will be ID 3 as well. All right, so we're kind of breaking this up. And then let's do one more. Let's get a different texture on here for the handle. So drag this up and this we're going to make. Doesn't matter what color it is, as long as it's different from the rest. And so if I come in here, I can region select in the front and just change this to ID 4, come up and just make sure I have all those different parts of that handle. There we go. All right. So this is our high poly. It has 2 bits of important information on it. It has smoothing group data so that we can tell the edges are defined because that should come from the mesh data. All right. The low poly shouldn't have anything. The textures are going to do all the work for us. And then it has surface data on the materials so that we can generate what's called an ID mask. And so let's just take this file, export selected, and we're going to export this out as Gladius _ HP. Say okay. All right. So there we go. High poly, low poly. Let's go back to Substance Painter. And if you haven't saved your column, go ahead and save it. If you're opening it fresh, that's fine as well, right? So I'm just going to come in here and say new project, Unreal Engine 4, 2048. I'm going to go through and select remember, you always select, anytime you're bringing something in that's going to be the visible portion, it is always that LP mesh. There we go, there's our Gladius. And then we go immediately over to texture set settings. Now here we're going to make a change in general properties. You want to unclick the lock and you want to change it to 2048 by 1024. Now hit bake mesh maps and let's change the lock. It's going to be 2048 by 1024. And now again, we're going to click on under high poly parameters, the high definition meshes. We're going to go through and select our Gladius HP. And what you see here is it's doing this thing where it kind of, that's the render cage where it looks out and that's what it uses to bake. So let's go ahead and we're going to bake selected textures. All right, and right away, what we see is if we look over here, these textures don't look right. If we return to painting mode and we look, remember how I said we are going to make tall textures? We made them wide, so we need to redo that. So let's change this to be 1024 by 2048. And now if we go into bake set mesh maps and swap these numbers, so it should be 1024 by 2048. And now when we bake, our little baked mesh maps should be narrow. There we go. And that's what we expected to see. So we'll return to painting, right? See, there's our textures. You see how those are they're kind of thin, right? Those are the baked ones. Let's go ahead and save what we have. So we'll go to that Gladius folder. And let's save our substance file because depending on your machine, it may crash and you don't want that. All right. So now we want to go over to layers, and now we're going to start putting some materials on here. So if we go ahead, let's slap iron brush on there. Doesn't look bad. Probably what I would want to do though is come down here to rotation and change that to 90 degrees so that the grain goes with the blade. And then I can right click and say add a mask with color selection. And under properties, you get this little pick color. And when you turn that on, you can now see your colors. And so if you click, now it assigns it only to that one spot. Excuse me. So let's plug in brass pure, and we will again right click and say add mask with color selection and pick a color, and we'll just select kind of those parts. See how this is working? Hold Alt to move around. And let's grab another. I bet there's some wood in here. Yep, there's this nice wood walnut. Let's drag that in. And same thing, right click and say add mask with color selection and pick the color. There we go. Remember, if you hold shift and hold shift and move your right mouse button left, right, you can see you can get the light to play across the surface. You see how it's reacting as if it is a different surface. And let's find something else to put on the handle then. Let's kind of put, let's just put this leather rough on there. Right click, add mask with color selection, and pick the color. And there we go. All right, so let's save this file, save, and then we're going to say File, Export Textures, and we're going to navigate again back up to 3ds Max, to our Scenes folder, to the Gladius. Select that folder. We're going to use Unreal Engine 4 and export those out. We can close this. And then if we come up to this Gladius folder, View, Extra Large Icons, you can see you have these narrow textures, right? And you get little micro details from that show up on the surface, so the light's going to actually play across it properly. So that's one way you can just use those defaults. Now, if you go through and you start downloading, if you go to like Substance Share and you start to grab some additional materials from there, let's get rid of these. These are ones that I pulled from online, so some of them some may come with the default install, some of them may not. But I really like this brass old. All right, and I can right click, add mask with color selection, pick those yellow areas. And basically what this is it's a folder. And inside the folder are all these other different types of materials and layer blending elements inside of them. There's a lot you can do with Substance. And really, we just touch the surface to kind of say, this is Substance and here's the basics. Fortunately, Substance is really well defined. And so you can get, it's really well documented. You get lots of information from it online. Let's find a good metal. Mm, Depends on the look you want to go for. Sometimes you get streaking on it, which is no good. I like to avoid those. Steel armor's not bad. Let me just do that one. Right click, add mask with color selection and pick that. Let's find a good wood. Mask with color selection, pick that color. And then let's get something fun on the blade or on the handle. Like ideally like an ivory would be really cool, but I don't think I have anything like that. You can always look online and see if we can find it. What if we did a jade? Add mask with color selection, pick that color. There you go. Really cool jade handle. Makes me think my silver armor looks lame. Let's find a better one. Steel stained. Nope. Let's do. I'm really hoping to find a better metal. That one's kind of cool, although we're getting some weird detailing there. That might not be the greatest. I guess we'll just stick with steel for now. All right, there we go. So now, if you already have textures, depends, do you want to save those or not? Because if you don't care, you could always come through and just hit export and save out over them. Last thing you want to remember, file, save. You don't have to match exactly what I did for your materials. It'll be good for you to launch the snipping tool and to get a snip of what's on screen here. All right. What else? Let's say new. This is what you want to get to turn in is I'm going to want a nice snip of this. And from here, let's go to the folder. And then again, we want the name, the BN underscore Gladius underscore, but then you just want to get rid of the rest of it and just simplify it down to BC for base color, N for the normal. See how that says normal? We're going to get rid of that and just make that N. And this last one is AORM. That's it. So now we will be able to take our low poly, because remember the low poly is the one we brought in, and our textures, we'll be able to bring those into Unreal and apply these textures to get this look.